We're rolling.
Welcome to the House Dudes podcast, where we invite you to follow us on our journey towards financial freedom using the power of real estate. I'm Jack Haas.
And I'm Josh Koth. Here at House Dudes, we believe in a couple key principles. Number one, the best way to retain information is by teaching it to others. And number two, a rising tide lifts all boats. We're not competitors, we're a community. So let's get into some real estate investing.
This episode is brought to you by Yellow Letter HQ. Head over to bit.ly/yellowletterhd for fast, affordable, direct-to-seller marketing. Tired of real estate marketing campaigns that don't get results? Yellow Letter HQ is one of the most competitive direct mail campaigns that can save your budget and your sanity. They deliver a fast campaign turnaround that gets your phone ringing. Check out their services at bit.ly/yellowletterhd. Well, we have Blake Templeton on the line, and Blake, thank you so much for joining us, and very timely. I know you have a book coming out, and with the possibility of what could be coming out of COVID-19, there's a possible recession on the horizon. I think we have a lot to chat about, but why don't we start things off with you introducing yourself?
Yeah, Jack, first of all, I just appreciate you bringing me on. I appreciate the opportunity. It's always my passion to pour in and share multiple things. One, experience. It's one of the most valuable things we have, right, to give. Last 14 years, I've done 300 plus transactions in real estate investments, and not one single has lost money. Not one single investor, has lost money. And so that in itself is probably one of the things I cherish in sharing, because it wasn't always just, easy to actually process through. And for most investors, if you're like me, in 2006, I was a college dropout without a penny to my name, knew I wanted to own my own business some way, somehow, and ended up paying a multimillionaire to mentor me, or maybe persuading him to mentor me is a better way to say it. And he said, pay me a lot of money. And then I went and persuaded Wells Fargo to give me a personal loan, and we're off to the races. I ended up burning the bridge behind me and forging through, and ended up, making six figures the first year, doubling the next. But the point I think it's probably most important to understand was I didn't have the capacity. A lot of people get stuck in the beginning just like taking action, but mine was, I didn't have the capacity for how much money I was making. I didn't have the maturity, I didn't have the wisdom of what I would call the wisdom of God to actually handle it. And God set me down, and it was just the come to Jesus moment. And he said, I've made you good at doing this, not for yourself, but so that you can actually help others. And that's actually where the book, The Solomon Way, came to fruition 14 years ago, in the birthing of it inside of me. And I just went back to my roots and found myself in the Bible, and in the middle of the Bible, you've got King Solomon, 3,000 years ago, and he just became king, and he's in his early teens, late teens, early 20s. And God says, what's one thing that you want? And he said, I want wisdom. And it always it hit me, because at that time I was arrogant and I was prideful, and it was all about building my empire and doing this thing to build my identity. And it was my money, and God just literally flipped it on its head and made it to where it was actually me managing his money and me walking in his wisdom versus me leaning on my own understanding. So the book, The Solomon Way, is it just got released today, by the way. I'm so excited that we were able to schedule this up. The Solomon Way is detailing the wealth strategy of the world's wisest man for the 21st century investor. I mean, Solomon was not only was he the very first trillionaire, but he was the very first one to actually document the nuances of the pillars and the dimensions of how he did his investments and why he did them, how God's wisdom came through his investments. And I coined it as a three-dimensional investment. And the three-dimensional investment, that's what we've built the last 14 years on, where no investors lost money. And Jack, I can tell you, for sure that it wasn't my crystal ball that of how we've done well, but it's truly following these ancient principles in the Solomon way.
So let's start with that three-dimensional way that you brought up, because you've with the emails that I've exchanged with your assistant or what have you, they even talked about you being in a position to be almost recession-proof. Like, how have you leveraged that to bear what we might be facing here?
Yeah, that's a great question. I go back and I think through, what it's like to not be three-dimensional. And the first dimension is that everything King Solomon did, every investment he did was directed with the wisdom of God. So it's directed by God. And so in real estate, just make it practical, we still have earthly wisdom that we to walk out, like our due diligence. And for instance, when we go into a market, we might buy out a large package of specific investments. When we go into any industry, we have 13 different economic indicators that they've got to all line up a certain percentage on a certain amount of years in a row. And it's like putting muscle on a guy by still stripping away his fat. It's like a very hard thing to do, but if that market has that, man, that's a very strong market. Mm-hmm. But without the wisdom of God, Jack, we've been into some situations where we've done all our due diligence. It looks perfect. Everything looks like it's just the silver lining investment. And I just felt and heard the voice of the Lord say, like, this is not a good investment. And then we come to find out later that it ended up not being because some stuff wasn't, revealed, or vice versa. It's like, man, the economic indicators and our due diligence just shows that it's just shy. It's not going to meet our numbers. It's not worth it. And then I felt direct peace of the Lord, like pushing it forward. It was just very clear that he was for it. He had favor on it. And we do it, and then some things break loose, and we see that it has exponential benefits. And so that's the first thing, is the first pillar, the first dimension is God's wisdom, like being directed by God. I find, Jack, all the time people who, especially our real estate investors, they still have an arm or a leg, even maybe in the stock market. Mm-hmm. And, they've been such a good steward in so many facets, but they actually just kind of, those monies might have just been put there in the very beginning, and they just kind of left them there. It was just kind of like, out of sight, out of mind. And I would say that the stock market is a one-dimensional investment, and it doesn't actually have tangible value. And that second dimension is tangible value. So it's the land, and then it's the improvements on the land. So it has to be God-directed, and then it's the tangible value with improvements. And so as the stock market would be, obviously it's not tangible. And matter of fact, the value is an emotional value. It's not even built on the actual company, gross revenue or even net profit. It's actually just the emotional value. So what we want to say is, let's pull all that out of the market. It's more of a casino. Let's take the chips out of the casino, cash them in, and let's go put that in tangible. So first dimension, again, is being God-directed. And second dimension is tangible value. So it has to be a tangible value. The third dimension is it's got to have cash flow. So it's a business that sits on the land, on the improvements. It's not the improvements, but the business that breathes through it, and that has actual cash flow running through it. And again, just going back to the stock market for a second, again, just because it's practical, everyone's got 50 or 100 or some 401k money, some IRA money still there. Well, more than 50% of stocks don't even pay a dividend anymore. And so that would be the hopes of the old cash flow. In the 1800s, when the stock market was actually created, every stock paid a dividend. And so the collusion has shifted things to such degree that there's no cash flow, and then it's really not correlated to the actual tangible value of the actual company. So these three dimensions have ran our real estate portfolio, and being God directed right now in this unprecedented time, that's the most important one. And it's not even, Jack, it's not even a spiritual orientation directly for the person, for the listener. We have investors all the time that are atheists, and they'll say, Blake, I don't really agree with everything where you are spiritually, but I invest all my money with you because if there is a God, I want to be protected by his wisdom. So it's the realization that everyone knows we have blind spots personally. Mm-hmm. I mean, we all got blind spots. As man, we will fail. And so we've got to actually utilize the wisdom of Solomon in the Solomon way he was directed by God. And so that's my largest encouragement to your listeners is, man, in this season, it's time to call a timeout. It's time to cut the emotions of all the things that you can't control. And it's time to look at your investments having to be directed by God.
So, when you say directed by God, let's explore that a little bit. Is it, when you say that, is it like trusting your gut? I'm trying to get some of my brain wrapped around
Sure.
the concept of what do you mean by that? I mean, is it just that instinct that something doesn't feel right and you actually listen to it? Or because we all have that to a certain extent, but a lot of us will ignore it depending on what's on the screen or on the piece of paper in front of us.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's easy to lean on our own understanding. It's easy to not cut ties with the emotions on earth. It's easy to buy into the soap opera, especially with, in the past, the COVID-19 and all the drama, 16% unemployment rate, and, the GDP falling out from under us. And, there's a lot of noise, and you and we've got to actually know the difference between wind and wisdom. And so to answer that question, I can't speak for everyone, but what I can do is I can speak from what the Lord's taught me through the Solomon way is that, for the last 14 years, every single investment that we do, it's been built on his precedent, like him revealing industries to us, him revealing a market to us, him revealing why numbers are what they are, what they aren't. And it's like truly hearing his voice. It's hearing the voice of God in our investment decisions, when to buy, when to sell, when to tweak, when to actually input more money, even though it financially wouldn't make sense, but put more money into it because of something that was going to happen. And the hardest thing is I think the first thing is we just got to realize that where do we have money that's not stewarded like that? And, the easiest way is the low-hanging fruit. So we just take some small steps. If anyone has money in the market, well, I don't know who the advisory company is, but if they weren't directed by God, you just have to call a timeout and say, if they can't control the market, you'd want to be invested with someone who is walking in the wisdom of God, who can actually at least control what's in front of them. They can at least control the tangible investment. Mm-hmm. And so you'd mentioned the ATM machine. It's so important in this unprecedented time for everyone to have a ATM machine on the side, a building block that just produces money like an ATM machine. So if you're in real estate and you've already got some apartments, or you've got your duplex, or you got your gig, we're just going to call it your gig. It could even be a high-paying job if you're doing the property management yourself. But whatever you got here, my challenge is to activate a little money machine, and that's in a 3D investment, a three-dimensional investment. You don't even have to go create all your 3D your three-dimensional investments, you can actually invest into a three-dimensional investment. So like with Boron Capital, with our company, that's all we do is we create these three-dimensional investments. And for example, we have one that's an 8% fixed rate of return. And you can take the distribution or it compounds. But let's just take the compound example. So if you had money in the market, well, number one, we'd want to activate that money. We want to pull that money out of the market because the market's not a three-dimensional investment. It's not going to follow the Solomon way. It's based on the emotional, and it's an intangible. So we want to activate that money because it's actually the net worth that's in the market is actually net worthless. It's like doesn't have any value because it's not tangible. Mm-hmm. So you activate that by taking it out of the market. And then we want to protect it and collateralize it. And how do we do that? In a 3D investment, it's actually invested into the real estate. And then it spits out an 8% return. Now, the beautiful thing is on an ATM machine like this, it's in the private market, not the public market. So not the stock market. It's in the private sector. It's in the private market. And it's a three-dimensional investment that runs without you. And when you compound it, then just take, for example, $100,000 at 8%, and it compounds for 30 years. So just like if Bob had money in the market and he's just going to let it roll, just take it out of the market, put it in tangible that's going to actually compound for you. And after 30 years, that 8% compounding each year, that $100,000 is now $1 million. And over that 30 years, it actually now becomes a 30% rate of return on that 100,000. So that's the power of a three-dimensional investment. That's the power of it, having a recession-proof entity. And, for all my investors that are in the apartment world, and you're thinking, I got big gains coming. Like if this happens right and we do this right, and I'm hoping that this is going to happen. And so that's good. You got some of that. If that like gives you the passion, the purpose, good. But you've got to have something. Like Solomon's investments were all three-dimensional investments. That's how he actually created massive wealth. That's how he gained such capacity for the wealth he had. And he was again walking in that wisdom.
So, you're coming at it at a very different approach than most people that I've talked to. At least the mindset piece of it you wear your spirituality on your sleeve. You're very comfortable talking about this. Did this originate from your mentor, or how did this come about?
As far as the three-dimensional investment, or
the King Solomon way. I mean, you look like a fairly young guy. It seems to be. It's just a very interesting approach. I mean, I haven't run into a lot of people who would even consider this.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate you asking. Let me fill in a little bit more about my actual story. So I shared a little bit, but after those first 3 years when I doubled and tripled my revenue and I was making a good rate of return, this is back when I was doing what I'd call one-dimensional investments. This is back in single-family homes was the majority of what we did. We were wholesaling properties. I had a massive short sale system. We were then doing, had 8 different crews doing, taking those wholesales that we'd buy and doing massive renovations and then sell them on the retail market. And then I was selling this course, all over the nation, telling people how to do this thing. Mm-hmm. I was, making somewhere in the ballpark after all my expenses, after all I could spend, still netting about $50,000 a month, just rolling in. In that pride and that arrogancy came in, as I had told you. And long story short, the Lord actually just set me down and had the banker call me, and he was trying to have me surrender everything to him. What I didn't know then was it was truly wanting me to model after Solomon, and wanted me to model one who's actually walking out financial stewardship correctly. And I'm modeling earthly models who aren't walking it out, who are, good guys and making good money. And that's all I was modeling. And so banker calls and says, hey, I'm the hatchet man. And unfortunately, the bank's hired me. The bank's not doing good. The one that had the 8 properties they were doing the renovations on. And he says, we're getting rid of all of our investor loans. And so you get 21 days to pay those off in cash. And if you don't pay those off in cash, well, they're all going to go to foreclosure. And I had this moment of reckoning because, see, Jack, I was actually the king of stopping everyone's foreclosures. That was the name of my game in short sales. I would go save the day. I was the hero. We had a 93% success rate. And we really owned our whole entire region. I mean, we were just killing it. And all of a sudden, the irony with God was, if you don't surrender, Blake, if you don't actually surrender over the power and the ego, then like your name is now on the platter. And so I did what every good, wise achiever would do. I'm going to go fight this. I'm going to fix this problem. I can take care of it. So I went to 8 different banks, and at this point, I had more cash. I had tons of cash in the bank, 6 figures in the bank. I had 800 credit score. I had all the things on paper to meet the need. Every bank, I went to 8 different banks. Every bank said, hey, yeah, we'll refinance them. No big deal. Yeah, all good. Oh, wait a minute. Wait, are they in pre-foreclosure? But wait, you don't get it. You don't understand. I'm current. I'm current on all my notes. And I became a leper. They literally just said, nope, sorry. And they literally shunned me. And there was this moment like, Blake, like God's talking to me, Blake, we can do this as long as you want to do it. We can play this game, but I have a bigger purpose for you. Fast forward, I'm actually 3 days before these properties, 8 properties go to foreclosure. I'm laying prostrate on the ground in my living room. And I'm like, the pain and the agony is so great. And I just call out to the Lord. I'm like, man, you can have it all. Like the pain is so great. You can have the house I'm living in. You can have the 8 houses. You can have my business. You can have it all. If I got to move back in with my parents, whatever I got to do, if I can just keep my relationship with you. And if you'll redeem my name, because now my name looks like I got 8 pre-foreclosures all of a sudden. And it was like the Lord literally said, Blake, man, we could have done this a whole different way. And the next day, the banker calls me and he says, we decided not to foreclose. We decided to let you keep the properties. We'll just renew the notes and just pay 2% down on each one of them and we're good. What? And literally the Lord then just told me, it was clear as day to me, Jack. He said, okay, Blake, now I'm going to give you a little and you're going to have to be faithful with that little. And then if you're faithful with that little, I'll give you a little bit more. So you're going to have to be faithful with that. And that little sometimes didn't pay my employees, And I'm like, but I had to go find a way. And I was faithful with that. And that's again, 12 years ago. And the Lord revealed this truth about Solomon. And the Lord revealed that, Solomon actually surrendered to the Lord in the beginning in his late teens and wanted God's wisdom. And he actually had him ruling over the entire kingdom, the whole entire country. And then he gave him wealth because of his heart to walk in that wisdom. And so that's where it's all come from, my man. It's just raw, digested straight from the Lord, the road of hard knocks. And that's my passion in the book, is to give the action steps of the wealth strategy of where you don't actually have to go the route of hard knocks. So whether you're an investor that's actually has massive passive income and you're thinking, I need to go create the ATM machine on the side of the passive income, or you're coming in from a doctor mindset and you've just been throwing some money in apartments or something and you're like, that makes sense. I need to have the ATM. no matter what, you and I, we want to walk in 3-dimensional investments. And that's the Solomon way. And Jack, it's, the book launches today, and my privilege, my desire is to give the book away to your audience for free. And I want to ship the book to them and just have them pay the shipping of it. I'll cover the book. I've done all the work behind it to get that price down, and I'll cover the book. And I want to give them the book. I want them to actually be able to have the book, to go through the wealth strategies, to make the tweaks that they need to make in their investment, to actually transform, to actually have that recession-proof portfolio in this season.
Well, great transition. So how would they get that information? And I guess that's a pretty small price to pay for a book. So I know most of my listeners
Right.
are pretty big readers, so it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. The best way is going to be pull out your cell phone, and what I want you to do is I want you to send me a text message. I want you to send a text message to Solomon. So you're going to text the word Solomon in the body of the text. Text the word Solomon to the phone number 31996. 31996. And what will end up happening is when you text the word Solomon to 31996, that'll begin the communication with me. And you'll end up sending me your name and your info. I'll send you the link to go on there. You'll pay shipping. I send the book. And then this is so exciting for me, Jack, because this is like helping redeem everything that I had to go through in the very beginning to actually realize that I could never do it on my own. All the good things that I was even doing for all the people in foreclosure, and like all the things, I even bought a moving truck and was helping them move and was paying their first month's rent for their apartment. But God's like, man, that's great that you're doing good deeds, but I want your heart. I want more than just good deeds. I want your heart. And so this is truly like everything laid bare of the wealth strategies. I mean, how do you actually have wealth and still love God too? Like, how do you actually align everything and live for a purpose bigger than yourself, but actually protect your investments? Most people are the mindset that if you're a good person or you're a person right with God, you make less money, and then or you're health, wealth, and prosperity, and you got it off balance. And how do you have both? And how do you actually use your wealth to influence other people? So again, it's text Solomon to 31996, and it'd be my privilege to have the book sent to you. All you pay is shipping and handling.
So, well, I can't thank you enough. This was a great conversation, and I think you point something out that's very important and something that I don't think is said very often. You also mentioned that a lot of people ask about how can you believe in God and seek wealth in any kind of fashion.
Right.
And I actually believe that God actually wants us to be wealthy and wants us to do well, and we're doing a disservice if we're not doing our best to bear fruit from His talent.
Right. Absolutely.
So, but thank you so much. It was a great conversation, and I hope we can do it again.
Hey, man, Jack, I would love it. And I would just want to share one last thing with your listeners that, I don't know where you are in this season and where the Lord has you, whether you're in abundance or in lack. But one thing that I've learned from Peter is that he said that I learned the secret of whether I was in lack or whether I was in abundance, of having peace with the Lord and knowing that lack season will actually pass. And if I can just hold on to my profession of my faith, that there will be abundance in the coming days. So I want to encourage you guys with that we're in an unprecedented time. So if it's caught you in a hard time, realize there's still hope for a future.
So, well, I can't ask for an ending better than that. So thank you again, sir. And like I said, I hope we can do it again sometime.
Hey, that'd be my privilege, Jack. It's good to see you, buddy. Talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you. We've put a lot of effort into providing useful content, and if you found value in the show and have any interest in supporting us with a small donation, head over to patreon.com/housedudes.
And if you have any thoughts or questions, shoot us an email at info@housedudes.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter @housedudes. And if you like what you're hearing, head over to iTunes, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It really helps other investors out there find the show.
And remember, massive positive impact requires
massive positive action. We'll see you next time. This episode was brought to you by housedudes.com. Do you have time to actively manage flipping and rentals yourself? If so, go for it. If you live in a market that won't cash flow or don't have the time to do all the work, are you just out of luck? If there was a way to participate more passively, would that appeal to you? I'm sure you have questions about how the process works and what to do next. If that's the case, fill out the form on housedudes.com/investors, and we'll reach out to see if you are a good fit for our business. This is first come, first serve, and we will have to stop taking applications when our goals are met. See you at housedudes.com/investors.
I don't like to tell a man what to do with his money, but if you ain't investing in property, then you're dumber than a dummy.
I'm not dumb. I'm smart.
Well, buy property. That's my advice.